Sometimes awesome movies go under the radar. I know, it's an unimaginable tragedy, but in a world so jam-packed with flicks and with so much media that competes with feature films, it's easy to see why. Thankfully, we can all put our heads together and share the best of the best that may or may not have gone unnoticed. It's time to talk about the top 5 scariest horror movies nobody talks about, part 3. Before we get started, I just want to shout out our newest channel, Viper Girl. It's a gaming channel that's going to be making videos on everything from Minecraft to FNAF to Cyberpunk, so make sure you head on over and subscribe so you don't miss an upload.
Oh my gosh, I almost died. I thought you were a cactus, my friend. I thought you were a cactus. We've got iron, baby. Yes. Okay, my main goal is to blow up and then act like I don't know nobody. Bro, no, I'm gonna fight you with a pork chop. No, come here. This is awesome.
Wicked, on with the list. Coming in at number 5, we've got Hagazusa. If you're a fan of Robert Eggers' work over the last half-decade or so, this is a movie you should have on your list. Slow and steady is the name of the game here, with plenty to soak in before the real scares start swinging. Some folks have compared this to The Witch, which is a pretty fair connection to make. It's a period piece largely focusing on a recluse who has trouble adjusting to life away from society. There's whispers of witchcraft, plus the title is literally another word for witch. There's goats too. All the elements required to compare something to The Witch is there, but Hagazusa is quite unique in its own right. The story takes place in a remote village in the 15th century Alps. Of course, this means that the movie is ridiculously gorgeous. Like stunning natural vistas, beautiful mountaintop shots, and more. This natural beauty, though, is contrasted by the actual events happening. We follow a young woman, Albrun, as she lives an isolated life from childhood. Her mother was seen as the local witch and not really trusted by anyone. Locals would make their way out to their secluded shack just to torment the young fatherless family. Eventually, Albrun's mother falls ill and starts to act unlike herself. She cannot care for Albrun anymore and disappears into the woods in the middle of the winter. Albrun discovers her mother's body the next spring and must become self-sufficient. We then jump forward and follow an adult Albrun, now a single mother herself. She lives in the same shack, tending to her goats and caring for her baby. This lifestyle doesn't sit well with the locals though, who berate her whenever she comes into town. She strikes up an unlikely and uneasy friendship with a woman named Swinda, but it doesn't end very well. The cruelty of people becomes very clear to Albrun, who finally decides to turn to what isolated her mother from the rest of society: witchcraft. After communing with the skull of her dead mother, Albrun begins to act strangely and sees the world very differently than she used to. And from that moment on, the world becomes much more terrifying. Hagazusa is one hell of a slow burn, but the gorgeous cinematography and haunting soundtrack provide a spellbinding backdrop that keeps you invested. As each event unfolds, feelings of unease and dread rise. You want Albrun to live a happy, if lonely life, but the world just doesn't want to let her. And once she makes the decision to leave communal life behind, there is no going back. The final stretch of this movie is impossible to forget and full of dark hidden meaning. I can only assume that less people talk about this one because it's a German period piece, but if any of what I just said speaks to you, definitely give this movie a watch. Hey folks, just a reminder to give this video a big thumbs up, it really helps with the algorithm. On with the video. Coming in at number 4, we've got Grave Encounters. You know I've got to shout out this Canadian found footage supernatural horror, all of those categories speak to me. And it seems that even less people have regular conversations about Grave Encounters than Hell House, which is crazy. So please, if you're a found footage fan, give this a watch and talk about it. We need more Canadian films brought up in conversation if we have any hope of staying relevant. Interestingly enough, when this movie came out, its trailer was a surprise hit. It racked up over 30 million views, which might not seem like all that much now, but in 2011, that was a big deal. I'll stop hyping up the surrounding circumstances now and get to the actual movie. We follow a TV crew who has decided to investigate an old abandoned medical facility. They made 5 episodes of their show, Grave Encounters, before the previous crew went missing during a shoot. Their new crew wants to follow up on what happened and makes their way to the Collingwood Psychiatric Hospital. Let's be real though, abandoned psych wards are a pretty classic creepy location, and especially when they're being investigated found footage style. Hell, there's a whole genre of YouTube content dedicated to exactly that kind of experience. Shoutouts Top 10 Central Dark. Of course, when they all arrive at the hospital, nothing is as it seems. For a little while, nothing seems to happen, feeding into a lot of people's skepticism, but boy, that doesn't last long. As it turns out, the head doctor at this facility performed all sorts of experimental and immoral procedures on his patients, causing their tortured spirits to stick around long after their untimely deaths. And these lobotomized loonies aren't too happy that folks are coming to visit. The crew can't resist the horrific pull of the hospital and become patients in their very own ways. Exits open to reveal infinite other hallways, and the day-night cycle stops making any sense at all. It's creepy, claustrophobic, and all around gnarly. Again, if found footage is up your alley, this is a quality pick. The descent into madness is careful and calculated, but provides plenty of over-the-top scares for all to enjoy and ruin your couch upholstery too. Plus, if you need a reminder, it'll definitely ensure that you're careful when around old abandoned buildings. Coming in at number 3, we've got Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Here's a true classic that was near impossible to watch for years, and not just because it's legitimately scary. See, Let's Scare Jessica to Death is a very interesting case study. Released in 1971, it was around in an era where horror wasn't all that economically successful. A lot of stuff was pretty schlocky at the time, and folks didn't tend to take scary flicks too seriously. The script for this movie was originally supposed to be satirical, following a group of hippies getting attacked by a lake monster. But when director John Hancock got a hold of it, he decided to make it a much more straightforward story. By adding in some inspiration gleaned from The Turn of the Screw and The Haunting, Hancock made a much more psychologically distressing movie. You can't quite trust Jessica, as from the beginning her mental state is called into question. This allows folks to fill in the blanks themselves. And as horror scholars tend to understand, people's imaginations will come up with stuff way scarier than any on-screen monster. However, at the time of release, a lot of folks overlooked these qualities and criticized it for being too sparse. Over time, it would become a cult hit though. The thing about cult hits from the 70s is that they're usually pretty hard to find a print of. This remained the case up until very recently, with home video copies of the movie being near impossible to track down. Thankfully, Scream Factory did release a Blu-ray last year. Even so, not enough people are talking about this formative, terrifying psychological slasher from the 70s. Coming in at number 2, we've got Lovely Molly. All you really need to know about this one is that that name is fun to say. Say it 5 times fast and you tell me you don't get a little dopamine to the dome. Okay, it's not really the only thing you need to know about this movie, I just thought it was a fun little exercise. What you actually need to know about Lovely Molly is that it's scary as hell. It's written and directed by Eduardo Sanchez of the Blair Witch Project fame, which you would think would cause it to be talked about more, but that's not the case. The Wikipedia article is actually pretty barren, so if you have extremely deep Lovely Molly knowledge, the internet would love your help. For now though, let's just informally talk about what makes Lovely Molly work. It's the tale of a young couple, Molly and Tim, returning to Molly's childhood home. It's always a red flag in horror, eh, when you go back to the childhood home? Lots of ghosts, lots of demons. So Molly is a recovering heroin addict, which tends to get in the way of her making a compelling case about the strange happenings around her. She also participates in plenty of strange happenings herself and doesn't offer much in terms of a coherent reason as to why. Mysterious shrines are discovered under sheds, neighboring families are monitored and recorded for unknown sinister reasons, demonic presences seem to rule Molly's life. It's a genuinely disturbing and horrifying movie with plenty of wild moments. All it needs is a fresh audience and folks can definitely talk about it some more. And coming in at number 1, we've got Noroi, The Curse. If you know, you know. This is probably one of the best found footage movies of all time. It's measured and careful in what it reveals and when. And by doing so, it manages to infuse the world's creepiest atmosphere into an already unsettling story. It just seems as though nobody really talks about it when discussing found footage at large. If you're not a big found footage person, this movie might change your mind. It doesn't rely on jump scares or shoddy camera work to excuse poor planning and execution. It uses these conventions to its advantage, all the while telling a compelling, mysterious tale. We learn about a documentary filmmaker named Masafumi Kobayashi, who was at one point working on a project known as The Curse. During the production of this film, Kobayashi disappeared and his house burned down. Most of the movie concerns itself with the footage he shot before disappearing, detailing the lives of folks affected by supernatural forces. The story starts small, with the investigation of a woman who seems to attract negative energy, but as more details about this woman are revealed, the tale becomes much more dark and complex. Noroi manages to pack all sorts of horrific details and intricate storylines into a 2-hour package. Most found footage movies keep it simple, as ones who aspire higher often fail to hold the audience's attention or get lost in the details. This movie, however, avoids these pitfalls, resulting in a compulsively rewatchable mockumentary full of some truly spine-tingling moments. After watching it all, you may very well feel as though the story was something that actually happened. It didn't, but the feeling is hard to shake. Hopefully I managed to introduce some lesser-known flicks to everyone's backlog, and if I didn't, well, I did my best. We can't all be underground aficionados. So what'd you think of the list? Have you seen any of these? All of them? What horror movies deserve some more time in the spotlight? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more hysterical ones from the top 5 biggest SCP monsters. The White Wolf says, I was actually wondering what that shirt was, and yes, I come from Texas, can confirm the introduction. Oh, it's Morbid Stuff by Pup. Listen to Pup. Kahana Lewis says, if one of the SCPs can take over your brain when you learn about it, why are you telling us about it? I'll let you ponder that one for a little while. Jonathan Doughboy says, if you like big, head on down to Red Lobster and check out SCP-5909, the Endless Shrimp. Garlic butter and bread? Day Day Landers says, we are going to die. Well, someday, yes, but I find it's nice to be at peace with it and then enjoy your time here while you can. And Stay the Spaniard says, why are you always wearing hats? That's another thing I can just pull out here. I'm always wearing hats because I like them. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm gonna go pick a fight at the local all-you-can-eat buffet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.